I wish we could all be together and you could take your questions in person, but we'll do our best here through the webinar format. And I'm going to go ahead and launch it by sharing my screen. So just give me a moment. And now you should be able to see my screen. And this evening's presentation is on lawn care fundamentals. And I take it most of you either have lawns and you're interested in taking care of them, or you're working as master gardeners and you field questions from the public about lawns. Lawns are something that people either love or hate in a lot of ways. Here's a preview of what we're going to talk about: the lawn situation, lawn ecology, standard grass options. We'll focus really extensively on how to grow healthy turf, talk a little bit about eco lawns, handling pests and diseases, and resources. Before we launch into that, and here's where I'm going to ask Erica to come back on and ask a question. Why do people grow lawns? So why grow lawns?
Well, a lot of us grew up with lawns, and so we're used to them, and we think of them as being sort of the normal or the standard. A lot of us remember playing on them and having fun on them. They're very cool in the summer, and they can be really beautiful.
Yeah, that's all true. And in terms of landscape design, I'd say lawns contrast really well with foliage in the background. If you want to play croquet or lawn, like bowling, that's a great place to do it, sitting and having a picnic. So there's definitely a lot of good reasons to have lawns. It's also sort of the default ground cover. And even if people don't want to take care of a lawn, they're kind of forced to in a lot of ways. And also with homeowners associations, a lot of cases they have to have lawns out in front because that's what is expected for a given neighborhood. So the bottom line is there's a lot of reasons to grow lawns, and they certainly have their place in landscapes. What is a lawn? Well, a turf grass defined as a grass species maintained as mowed turf. On your left-hand side, mowed really pretty nicely. On your right-hand side, not so much. There's a spectrum of turf grass, starting with the neglected lawn, the home lawn. We're going to talk about those. Parks, schools, athletic fields, golf courses are sort of outside of the purview of this particular talk. What makes a great lawn? Well, folks, when I ask this question of audience, people say, well, it's homogeneous, meaning it's nice and even looking. It's really nice and dark and green. There's no weeds growing there, etc. So this is a perfect lawn, I would say. And why is it perfect? Because it's artificial turf. And if you want to have a perfect lawn and you don't want to do the work, this is a really good option. My guess, and they're not cheap to install, but my guess is if you amortize time and energy out and effort out over a period of time, it might make sense if you want to have a really good looking lawn and don't want to do the work to go this direction. In the United States, there's a lot of lawns, something like 25 to 30 million acres of turf and lawn. And overall, people apply nutrients, so nitrogen, other nutrients to the crops at about the same rate as they do for vegetables and other things. So surveys done that 50 to 78% of people fertilize, and a good chunk of those people also over-fertilize lawns, and that the use of weed and feed is also really common. We'll come back to weed and feed, but I would say overall, when you're feeding a lawn, that's a good thing. When you're doing weed control on the lawn, that's a good thing. Having those two products coupled in weed feed, in my view, leads to unnecessary use of pesticides and fertilizer sometimes. Okay, the history of the lawn. Well, thinking back to the grassy carpets in the Persian Empire, in Victorian England, lawns were a status symbol. So people had them, and you can see in the lower part of the picture here, the lawn is being mowed by sheep. And then into modern suburbia, lawns are kind of as American as white picket fences and apple pie. People often ask about, well, can I have a sustainable lawn? And let's think about that a little bit. So the definition of sustainability is it's able to be prolonged over an indefinite period without damaging the environment or without depleting a resource. It's renewable. So are lawns sustainable? I would say overall, there are way more sustainable land choices that you can do. But if you do want to have a lawn, there are choices that you can make to make it more sustainable. And we'll go through that as we go along here. What I'd highly recommend if you want to have a lawn is to get clear on your goals. So low maintenance, grass, weeds, moss. So that's kind of the default lawn that evolves over time. A 3-season lawn where there's no plumbed irrigation system, they're going to typically go dormant during the summertime and brown up. They survive, but they're a little bit less competitive against the weeds. We're going to talk about eco lawns as we go here. And then if you want to have like a recreational lawn, you're going to probably need to provide 4 seasons of care, including summer lawn. And then a super manicured lawn is really meticulous and an awful lot of work. And that's certainly something that some people choose to do. And here's a joke, but let's just say, here's my lawn. I have it professionally maintained. Haha, not really. This would be a professionally maintained lawn at a really nice house. In actuality, this is my lawn at my house in Southwest Portland. And you can see it's nice and green, but you can also see that there are some broadleaf weeds like clovers mixed in there and things like that. So I have a fairly large yard, and there was getting on I don't know, a couple thousand square feet of lawn. I've shrunk it down over time, but overall, you know, the less lawn you have, the easier it is to maintain. Here's a really nice do-it-yourself intensively maintained newer lawn, and whether that's by seeding or by sod, when lawns are installed, they're going to look great. Over time, they're going to change. They're going to evolve, and more species will come in, and they become harder and harder to maintain over a period of time. And that's where the expectations really come in. So if one were to install a brand new lawn like this, there are steps you can take to keep it looking this good over time, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of planning. Here's a do-it-yourselfer maintained older lawn. You can see it's still looking really nice. It's presentable, it's mowed well, but the even green is fading a little bit. There's some splotches of lighter colored green in there as well. This is definitely the kind of lawn I see a lot in Portland area. So the unirrigated home lawn out in front here. In this block, it's looking pretty green, and my guess is because the clover is mixed in, and that's keeping it looking pretty good. In the closer block here, there's not a lot of clover. The grass is really, really dry. And then there's lots of looking like false dandelion and other weeds mixed in there as well. And then there's also that's called specialty lawns, where people are using bent grass, which is the kind of grass people use in putting greens, excuse me, for golf. Has to be mowed really short, but overall it's very drought tolerant and looks pretty good. So there's this spectrum of lush green turf, hardy drought tolerant turf, and dormant turf. All of those are within the spectrum of acceptable for home lawns. But it really begs the question, what should lawns be? Do they have to be all grass? Do they have to be just one species of grass? Are there any good broadleaf plants to have in there? What are the niches for eco lawns or alternative lawns? And who decides what's appropriate? If you own your own place and you have good standing with your neighbors, you can probably do what you like on your lawn. If you live in a location where you have a homeowners association, oftentimes they have some strict guidelines about the appearance of lawns. I've consulted with one group out in Washington County that they fined people when they had dandelions and clover growing in their lawns. And there were some folks there who wanted to educate others and say, you know, hey, this isn't necessary. And then there was other folks who were saying, yeah, this really is necessary. So there's a bit of a tension out there in terms of lawns and how they should look. Also, just want to point out that if you want to have a mowable, really low growing ground cover, there are definitely other choices besides grass that are going to be way lower maintenance. So in this case, a juniper, vinca, cotoneaster, and then this next slide, a euonymus. This is looking like a really nice mowed area, and it would require a whole lot less work than the lawn that's in the foreground here. Moving on to lawn ecology. So oftentimes when people start a lawn, they're going to have mostly perennial ryegrass is sort of the desired look. That's the lush green that people really like. Over time, lawns are going to transition from what's planted to sort of a climax set of species that are growing that are going to be dictated by the amount of sun that's there, by the soil that's there, by the watering regime, and so on. And here's a climax lawn right in my neighborhood in Southwest Portland. And you can see it's just moss. And it makes sense since it's a shady area here. There's a large tree that shades this lawn. So I've been observing this lawn for 4 or 5 years now, and they have to mow it once or twice a year. It looks really good. It's not going to take a lot of sort of abuse or dogs running on it or things like that. But overall, it serves a purpose. It's a great ground cover, it's low maintenance, and the moss is what wants to grow here, and the folks over time have just let that happen. The biggest challenge and slash opportunity with lawns is that there's going to be a shift in species over time. So the number of grass species increases, dicot plants invade. The mowing is going to influence what kind of dicots are there. Drought is going to influence the kind of grasses and broadleaf plants growing. Soil drainage, shade, and then inputs like fertilizer. All of those are going to dictate the climax lawn that's going to show up after a period of a couple years after a lawn is started. Here's one example for you, and that is ryegrass slowly converting to bent grass. Bent grass, like I said earlier, is the kind of grass that's used in putting greens. And in the photos here, it's the lighter green lawn. The dark green here is ryegrass. Looks really good. Bent grass here is lighter. It's a little bit spottier. So this is after 2 years, after 3 years, after 5 years, the conversion is happening, and it's maybe 60, 70%. And then 6+ years, it's mostly bent grass. Why? Because bent grass will grow with less fertilizer and it'll grow with less water. So unless you're really taking steps to keep the ryegrass growing and reseeding it on a regular basis, the conversion will happen. Also, lawn moss is another thing that's going to happen. Moss is a 4-letter word for some people. They really don't like it. I showed you a picture of it a little bit earlier. The things that affect moss: shade, low fertility, low pH, summer drought, injury by turf. If you don't want turf in your grass, you can definitely rake it out, and you'll want to expose the bare soil, reseed the area, or put in a patch, and then water it, get it going, and then fertilize it over time. Really, the very best way to keep moss and other weeds for that matter from growing is to grow dense turf, like on the right-hand side here. So this is ryegrass. It's looking pretty good, nice, dark and green. The way that this is maintained is by mowing it, by fertilizing it, by watering it, by applying seed on a regular basis. And then on your left-hand side, where there's all these gaps, well, you can guess what's going to happen. Where you have soil exposed, weeds are going to grow. And some of those weeds are, of course, the dandelion. Dandelion is a perennial. It has these very long roots. You can keep mowing it and it's going to stay low, but it's still going to flower. And then if it creates the seed head, you'll get more dandelions growing. Also, people, in terms of a neighborly sense, dandelion floating seeds can land on your neighbor's property. So it's a discussion that you might have. If you want to have dandelions, well, you want to make sure it doesn't affect your neighbors as well. False dandelion, those are going to be the yellow flowers that are in lawns right about now. They're a little bit scragglier looking, And here on the right-hand side, you can see a very dense field of false dandelion. Some more weeds include white clover. I'm a fan of white clover myself because it stays green. A disadvantage, I suppose, of white clover is that if you want to walk barefoot in the lawn, you might get stung by a bee, or if you have kids who are allergic, that might be a problem. But overall, this Dutch white clover is pretty tough. It's really difficult to eliminate from lawns. As a nitrogen fixer, it grows in lawns with a low fertility situation. So if you really want to keep white clover out, your best course of action is to add fertilizer often and to keep the grass competitive against the clover. English daisy is another weed that will grow, and to me they're kind of cute and a good part of a lawn. Other people might not agree. A lot of people don't like annual bluegrass. This often will grow on the fringes of lawn and really poor soil conditions. It'll set these seeds multiple times per year. It's a different color than lawns. If you want to control it, it takes a fair amount of work. It doesn't mix in really nicely with grasses necessarily, other grasses. Here's a sort of a mixture of different weeds you might see in lawns. The creeping buttercup with the yellow flowers indicating sort of heavier, poor draining type soil, English daisies, and grasses. All of these can be mowed and will behave themselves more or less, but it's not a homogeneous stand of grass. Here's another photo. We've got English daisies, clovers, and false dandelions all mixed together. This is sort of the default. When you're not deliberately keeping the lawn in grass, you're gonna get broadleaf weeds like this growing in. Others might include lawn ivy, yarrow, and we'll talk about yarrow a little bit later with reference to eco lawns. Oxalis is another weed that will grow in lawns. Veronica, and for me, Veronica has some really nice little pretty flowers and blends in pretty nicely overall. Lawn violets. So lots of different broadleaf weeds will move in, depends on your soil, depends on how much you're mowing, depends on the light, depends on how much fertilizer you're adding. But over time, again, lawn is going to evolve into a climax lawn consisting of turfgrass species plus broadleaf plants. And then there's the moles and gophers. And I have moles in my lawn, and they're kind of the bane of lawns in a lot of ways because they're bringing soil to the surface. And as I mentioned earlier, where you have soil, you're going to have weed seeds landing there, and they're going to grow. So if you really want a nice clean lawn, you're going to need to deal with moles and gophers. That's a whole separate topic, but let's just say it's a high art to learn how to trap moles and gophers really well. So Erica, now would be a good time to take some questions if people have any in there.
There's one question, and it's, if a traditional lawn is switched over to a low ground cover, what preparation is needed to the lawn?
Great question. So if you have lawn and you're wanting to go to a different ground cover, I would probably kill the lawn with herbicide and then rototill the area. And then with any other ground cover, you'll want to basically buy flats and plugs and set them out at the recommended spacing, and then water them to get them established. Depending on the species, they may or may not need ongoing watering. But like the juniper and some of those other ground covers that I showed would be okay without an irrigation system. Okay, thanks folks.
There's another question.
Sure.
It says, what about heavy clay soil? How to amend this for better growth?
Yeah, with heavy clay soil, lawns don't necessarily like growing in heavy clay. Overall, the recommendation for clay soil is to add compost to it and to rototill that in as deeply as you can. That's going to help to improve the drainage, and it's going to basically improve the growing conditions. Also do want to point out, though there's not research-based information on it, but there is some interesting examples of people mixing in quarter minus gravel. So it's pea gravel in essence that people add on lawns, and as the temperature changes, the lawn expands and contracts, and the gravel gets sucked in underground, and it improves the drainage reportedly. And I've seen some examples of the pea gravel lawn, and they look just fabulous. And also, if you're looking to plane out an area, like if you have a really bumpy lawn, if you mix pea gravel with compost and plane that out over your area and then seed over top of it, it could help to even it out and also improve your drainage. Okay, so the bottom line with lawns is that if you still want one, a smaller lawn is equal to less work. And to know what your expectations are, and to have the appropriate workload or the appropriate steps to keep the lawn looking how you want it. I'm going to talk about growing healthy turf, which includes choosing the right plants and providing them with the right care. I'm going to talk about establishing and renovating lawns, mowing and keeping the blades of your machine sharp, fertilizing, and watering. Here's an awesome chart, and Erica mentioned earlier that she's going to send you links to some of OSU's lawn publications, and this is a great one about lawn maintenance. And here's a chart that lays it out: high, medium, low input maintenance lawn calendar. So if you want a high input lawn, you're going to be mowing it most of the year. You're going to need to fertilize it 4 times a year. You're going to need to irrigate it during the summer. Recommended that people do aeration, overseeding twice a year. Overseeding is the practice of basically passing over your lawn and reseeding it, or just seeding over top on a regular basis. And then dethatching it as well. So that's definitely a high maintenance lawn. Medium maintenance lawn would be a little bit less work in terms of you're still going to be mowing it, but it's less fertilizer. You also probably want to water it all year. And then these practices of aeration, overseeding, and dethatching. And that, excuse me, and then down here at the low maintenance lawn, mowing. I'm really excited for my low maintenance lawn, because here we are in July and it's just starting to dry out, and I can stop mowing it weekly and probably just mow it a couple more times this summer. And that definitely makes me happy, and more specifically, it makes my kids happy because they won't have to do it. If you do want to go low maintenance, it's still recommended that you fertilize. And the ideal timing of that is going to be September, October, and I'll talk about that soon enough. Watering during the summer, if you do water it a couple times, it's going to help. If you let it go totally dry, the weeds will become a little bit more competitive. Aeration and then overseeding as practices for the low input lawn. Notice that a low input lawn is still a fair amount of work. Let's talk about establishing a lawn from scratch. And the timing, the recommended timing for starting a lawn would be late August to mid-September or so. The reason is soil temperatures are warm, and then it's going to start raining relatively soon, so you won't have to water it too long necessarily until the fall rains begin. I'd recommend that you get a soil test done and figure out how much lime you need to apply. So if you do get a soil test done, tell them you'll want to grow turf grass and get a recommendation for lime. And then add weed-free compost liberally. So you're trying to improve the soil conditions. And then with rototilling, it's easy to over rototill an area and pulverize the soil, and then you end up losing all of the air and kind of defeating the purpose. So I'd say 2 or maybe 3 passes, but probably not more than that. Then you're going to want to rent a lawn rake and a roller. A lawn rake is sort of like a 3-foot long rake, so it helps you set up a nice grade. And a lawn roller is going to be something like, show you in the next photo, so it helps to compress the soil and make a nice seed bed. And then you're going to want to apply seed really liberally. Lawn seed is cheap. You want to add an awful lot when you're trying to establish it. It's a really good idea to fertilize right when you set up a lawn. That way, once the grass starts growing, it'll have the nutrients it needs to keep going. And then over top of all that, just a little bit of mulch. So a mulch roller is sort of a wire barrel that you fill with mulch, and it helps you to lay out a really nice thin layer of mulch, and that's going to retain water so that you can get your seeds germinated. And then here's where, if you have an automatic sprinkler system, that's going to make it easy. You can set it to go multiple times per day to get the grass established. If you're hand watering, you'll probably want to just leave your sprinkler out on the lawn and set your alarm to go out there multiple times per day and keep a nice moist seed bed so that the seeds germinate. Here's some photos of that process. We have the rototilling, we have the lawn rake, the rolling here, and then the seeding, and then the mulch rolling after that. What you're really going for in lawn establishment is really good seed to soil contact. And on the left-hand side, it's seeded and raked. And on the right-hand side, it's seeded and not raked. The raking process is going to definitely help to get better contact with the soil. Also, searching for the optimum seed rate for ryegrass. Here's 2 pounds per area, 4 pounds, 6 pounds. Which lawn looks best? This one on the right-hand side. And then there's more, 8 pounds, 10 pounds, 12 pounds. You can see here that the heavier you go with the seeds, the faster the lawn is going to become established. Here's applying a mulch roller, and you can see it lays in a really nice, very light layer of mulch over top. And here OSU has done some trials with regards to mulching lawn. And on your left-hand side, no mulch, and on your right-hand side, it's mulched. Which lawn would you rather have? Probably over here. And then a little bit more about mulch, in that here we have no mulching, light sawdust, light compost, heavy compost, 17 days after planting. And the lawn that's looking the best is the lawn, or the turf grass that has had the heavy compost application of mulch. And here's some fertilizer trials as well. So the dark plots all receive nitrogen, and the other plots just receive potassium and phosphorus. So these dark green ones had nitrogen. So again, when you do set up your lawn, you'll want to fertilize it right at that time. You'll want to apply a lot of seed. You'll want to apply the mulch. You'll want to fertilize it. That's going to be the best way to get lawn established. So to go through that step again, those steps again in terms of establishing a lawn, mid-August, really getting the soil tested, adding compost, rototilling, grading it, rolling it, applying your seed very liberally, applying fertilizer, applying mulch, and watering. If you want to go for sod, awesome. It's more expensive, certainly. And the main thing is to put the green side up with sod and to stagger the seams, just like you're laying brick. And then there's where a lawn roller would also come into play, where you're rolling over the top of it with a weight, basically to press the roots down into the soil so that they get going really well. And then irrigate sod just like you would a seeded area. It needs an awful lot of water to get going initially. Okay, talking about lawn renovation now. So let's say you have a lawn and it's not looking so hot and you're wanting to improve it. The first thing you're going to want to do is determine what weeds are growing there and how you're going to deal with them. If you have a small area and you like doing handwork, then you could pop out dandelions and things like that with a tool like this. In the middle here is Burnout. This is an organic herbicide. I'd say pass on organic herbicides. They're just contact herbicides. They're going to burn stuff, but they're not going to kill dandelions and things like that. a broad spectrum herbicide like Roundup, glyphosate, active ingredient. If you want to kill the whole thing, it's really recommended in a lot of ways, and that allows you to start from scratch. And then the question is, so in renovating, we're not tilling it necessarily. What we're basically doing is scalping the lawn and getting it ready for seeds. So on the left-hand side, a complete renovation, herbicide, dethatching, and then reseeding. And on your right-hand side, a partial renovation with dethatching and overseeding. So herbicides used over here, killed it all, and over here, just scraping all of the dethatching, so scraping all the grass away to expose the soil. Again, to get grass established, you need really good seed to soil contact. So practically speaking, with dethatching, you're going to want to mow it very, very short. And then I would recommend renting a power dethatcher, or you could also, if you have a very small area, you could use a rake like this. And then you're going to go over it as many times as you need to expose the soil. The thing about dethatching is that you're going to generate a lot of biomass. So this is a dethatching machine right here, and all these bags, so let's call it 25 bags full of thatch, have been removed from just this, let's call it 1,000 square foot lawn. So it's a lot of material that you're going to remove. Here's where also, if you want to, you could use a Core Aerator. I would do that sort of up front, and the idea is the aerating is going to poke knives down, pull the plugs out, and then if you go over it with the thatcher after that, it's going to pulverize those and create really nice soil. Also, I would note back to the question about improving clay soils for lawn, aerating is one of the steps that you can do to improve your drainage for sure. All right, so that's renovating lawns, and then the process of regular overseeding. So going back to the chart that showed the maintenance, all of the different steps of lawn maintenance involved overseeding. So that's going over each year, applying lawn seed, both sort of over bare areas. I'm a big fan of lawn patch because it has some mulch and fertilizer mixed in, and it's great for covering smaller areas. And I suppose just in all the questions that I get from the public about lawn maintenance, not many people do that overseeding practice. And it really is one of the very best ways to keep your lawn looking like the grass you want and not evolving towards the weeds that you don't necessarily want. So with overseeding, reading the package, applying the material, spreading it out over the whole lawn, regardless if there's turf grass growing there or not. Remember that grass seed is relatively cheap, and one of the best ways to keep your grass as grass is by overseeding it. In terms of choosing which kinds of lawn species to use, here we are in the Northwest, we go with cool season grasses. Grass thrives in full sun. If you don't have full sun, it's going to be harder, much harder to grow a lawn and keep it looking really good. Different lawns have different sort of attributes, and we're going to go through those. So perennial ryegrass is the most common turf in the Pacific Northwest, and people really like it because it's nice and lush and green. The thing about ryegrass is that it stays lush and green when you give it enough water and enough fertilizer. And then it stays competitive with the weeds when you mow it a little bit on the high side. And it definitely requires full sun. So let's just say that perennial ryegrass is desirable, but it's also high maintenance. A little bit lower maintenance are the fescues. Fescues handle drought a little bit better. They handle it when they don't get quite as much fertilizer. And they also handle traffic. So if you have a dog run or your kids are playing baseball or things like that on the lawn, I would go with fescue because they are more durable. So there's tall fescues, there's length fescues. Oftentimes when you go to a store and buy lawn seed, you'll see basically one of two kinds of mixes. One will be about 70–80% ryegrass and 20–30% fescue. And then the others will say for shady areas, and those ones will be 70% fescues and 30% ryegrass. So if you have shade, you definitely want fescue. If you're wanting to use it durable, you're going to want to go with the fescue type mixes. Mowing is one of the key strategies for maintaining grass. Mow high, mow often are really the axioms, and that's especially in the springtime. You probably are going to need to mow twice a week because the grass is mowing really fast. If you want to use a mulch mower, that's a good thing, and I'll talk about that with a second. Keeping your blade sharp, it's really a good idea to maybe have two blades. One you get sharpened professionally, or if you're good at using metal sharpening tools, you keep that one sharp, and then you swap them out about every 6 months or so. That way, as it's mowing, it's going to make a nice clean cut, and it's going to minimize potential for diseases and whatnot to get into your grass. This is a mulch mower, and mulch mowers have a closed deck. They don't have like a bag where the grass gets shot into, or they don't shoot it off to the side. They have a couple different blades, and when they spin around, the grass will get chopped up into really fine pieces. And then when it gets chopped up, it's going to return back to the grass. And when it breaks down, it can actually provide maybe about half of the annual nutrients you need for a lower maintenance type grass. So mulch mowing is also fertilizing at the same time. This is my house, and we use a push mower and relatively small area, and I just don't like the noise or the fumes of gas mowers. But with push mowers, it definitely takes 2 or 3 passes to get it really chopped up well. If you miss a week and the grass gets really tall, it becomes pretty challenging to chop through it. Do want to point out that these days battery technology is improving, and there are pretty decent battery powered mowers out there. So if you're looking for a regular type mower but you don't want to have a internal combustion engine, check out the newer battery powered mowers. They have enough oomph to do a good job. They're not going to cut through tall grass, but if you're mowing every week or a couple times during a week during the really fast growth period, they will definitely get the job done. Here's a chart that shows the response of the root system of grass to the height of cutting. So the lower you cut the grass, the smaller the root system will be. The higher you cut the grass, the longer the root system will be. The advantages of having a longer root system is that the grass is better able to absorb water and nutrients. So that sort of axiom of mow high, mow often, if you set your mower at 2.5 or maybe even 3 inches, it's pretty long, but it's going to really just lead to a healthier lawn, less water needs, less fertilizer needs. And then as well, especially if you're going with a perennial ryegrass, it's also going to be more competitive versus against the weeds. Here's another way of showing that. This is granted sort of ideal soil medium, but this is grass cut at 2 inches, 1 inch, and 0.5 inch. And you can see the response of the roots. I would go with this one on the left-hand side. The roots are going all the way 2+ feet down here, versus over here, it looks really pretty wimpy. Also, in terms of the seasonality of mowing, in the spring, you could mow a little bit tighter. In the summer, when the grasses become more drought stress, mowed a little bit longer. That's going to grow a longer root system. And then the fall, you could bring it back down again. So let's call it 2 inches in the spring, 3 inches in the summer, and back down to 2 inches in the fall. Mow often. If you don't mow often, then you're going to end up with all of this. It's not thatch. It's really just chopped up grass stuff that doesn't hasn't broken down. It forms clumps over time. The grass underneath that would grow. So if it were me in this situation, I would mow it once, wait a day or two for it to dry out, mow it again, and try to chop up that material the best you can, and then try to stay on top of the mowing and not letting it get too long where you're ending up with all this debris. Keep the blades sharp. In this case, you can see the blades were not sharp and the top of the grass is all frayed. You can avoid that entirely by having sharp blades. In terms of fertilizer, apply the lowest effective amounts to get a response from the grass. If you want to, if you're really monitoring your fertility program, you could certainly get soil tests done every couple of years. By and large, let's just say you're gonna need to apply nitrogen fertilizer. Also, as you are fertilizing, if you have a rotary spreader, it's going to throw things off to the side. It might get into your landscape beds. It might get onto your walkways and so on. So drop spreaders do a really good job of getting fertilizer exactly where you want it to go. Seasonal turf growth. So here's a calendar, January through December along the bottom. And in the winter time, the grass is dormant. It's not growing a whole lot. And that period from mid-March until mid-June or so, that's like that 6-week period. That's when the bulk of the grass growth is going to occur during the year. And then you can see the proportional roots that develop during that time. During the summer, during the drought stress, the growth slows down quite a bit, even if you're irrigating, and the roots are going to diminish as well. And then during the fall, they're also going to be growing. And then fall storage. If you're really looking to maximize your fertilizer applications, or if you're just going to do a low maintenance lawn, the recommendation is that you fertilize in the fall. Why? Because you're going to set up the roots to really push growth come next spring again. So here's a chart, fertilizer calendar for irrigated lawns. High maintenance, 4 times a year, medium maintenance, twice a year, and the utility lawn, you're really just going 1 time a year. And then each of these applications is 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. If you think back to the mulch mowing that I mentioned earlier, if you are doing mulch mowing, that's going to be another dose of nitrogen in essence for the lawn for that season. In terms of fertilizer, typically lawns are all fertilizers. NPK are the number ratios. The soils, by and large, in our area have sufficient phosphorus and potassium. So it's really, you're going to be looking for high nitrogen fertilizers. If you want to use slow release or organic fertilizers, that can minimize runoff. Blood meal would be one example. So if you like organic fertilizers, lawn fertilizers that they sell are going to have blood meal or feather meal. Those are about 11% nitrogen. Premium lawn food down here, synthetic fertilizer, 32% nitrogen, 0 phosphorus, 4 potassium. So high first number is what you're going to be looking for. And then the most important thing about fertilizer is reading the package and applying the correct amount per area of lawn that you have. With synthetic fertilizers, if you apply too much, you can very much burn your lawn, and it'll be counterproductive. Just a note about organic fertilizers. A lot of folks, we get questions from, want to use organic fertilizers. The thing about it is that you'll have to apply much more material. So an organic fertilizer, 432 versus a 3300, this is the amount of material you need to apply 1 pound of actual nitrogen. Turns out that the cost is going to be about the same fertilizer to fertilizer. So if you want to fertilize using organic materials, organic meaning derived from plant, mineral, animal sources, it's going to take more material and cost you more money. Okay, and then there are definitely lawn species with lower fertility requirements, and that's going to include the fescues and also eco lawns, like you can see in the photo here with all the lawn daisies and other non-grass species growing there. In terms of watering, let's see, with watering, the main thing is water when it's cool, so you minimize evaporation. Don't exceed the rate at which the soil can absorb. So if you leave a sprinkler on lawn all day, pretty quickly it's going to start to run off because the water can't, or the soil can't absorb it anymore. And the recommendation is that you apply about 1 inch of water per week in increments of about a 1/4 inch. So that means if you have an automatic sprinkler system, you'll set it to go on for just short period, multiple times per week, ideally. That practice is going to make it such that the roots are getting the water that they need, but you're not going to have any runoff. The water will not exceed the amount that can be absorbed by the soil. So how often to water? With a hose and sprinkler, once or twice a week. An in-ground, hard plumbed irrigation system, more than once per week, less than 7 times per week. 3, 4, 5 times per week would be just fine. Each year, if you have an in-ground sprinkler system, you'll want to make sure that your heads are vertical so that the water is distributed evenly. We already talked a little bit about coration as one of the sort of key practices for maintaining turf. I would say you can rent the machines, you can do it. It's not required necessarily, but if you're wanting a higher maintenance lawn, I would definitely do core aeration. Shifting gears a little bit and talking about eco lawns. Eco lawns, the idea is that we want grass, and it could be perennial ryegrass or fescues for that matter, and then mixing in broadleaf plants intentionally, including yarrow, clovers, daisies. So here's a great example of grass. You can see the blades here, and then yarrow. So this is common yarrow. It's also grown as a landscape plant, but when it's mowed, it behaves, it stays nice and low, and it looks fairly uniform mixed in with the grasses. Other folks, strawberry clovers mixed in with grasses here. Definitely pretty cute little strawberry clover flowers. Looks pretty good, has some advantages for sure. Lawn daisies would be another intentional broadleaf to mix in with an eco lawn. So here's yarrow white clover in the summer, nice and green. And here's yarrow and ryegrass. So in the top, yarrow ryegrass. In the bottom, just the grass. And after 5 weeks without summer irrigation. So you tell me which looks better. It looks a lot more green up here because of the broadleaf that's mixed in. If you're wanting to go for a drought tolerant lawn and you're going to wanting it to stay green during the summer, you might consider the eco lawns. There is a store in Portland called Progress, and they have lots of really good eco lawn seed mixes if you want to go that direction. Here's another example for you. On the left-hand side, hard fescue. On the right-hand side, eco lawn mix. 1 month with no lot of water. It's looking pretty green over here. The grass over here is starting to fade. And again, these brown spots are okay, but the grass will be less competitive. And over time, the weeds will move in. A number of years back, OSU did eco lawn trials, and this is they did 4 irrigations per summer, and they mowed it every 3 weeks. So clovers and other things mixed in here, looking pretty good. So really just mowing it once per month during the course of the summer. Irrigating it once per month and mowing it every couple weeks. On your right-hand side, Wilsonville, no irrigation, 3 mowings during the summer. So there definitely are broadleafs mixed in here, but it's looking pretty rough overall. And this is the OSU campus down in Corvallis. To me, this is a great place to stop and sit and have a picnic. So eco lawn in practice in a municipal setting. One last example for you of an eco lawn, and this is with clovers that are mowed really high. This wouldn't be for a traffic area where you want to walk, but if you're looking to contrast the ground versus your pretty flowers here and the hedge in the background, this is definitely one choice. All right, last topic that we're going to talk about here is with regards to pests and diseases. And let's start by, first thing you need to consider is site conditions. So in order to grow grass successfully, what you need full sun. You need reasonably well draining soil, and you need either irrigation or choose not to water the area. In terms of the species, perennial ryegrass, high maintenance, needs a lot of fertilizer, needs a lot of water. Fescues are lower maintenance, higher durability, less water, less fertilizer. The cultural practices we talked about include mowing regularly, include watering, include fertilizing, include aeration, dethatching, all those different practices. And then very lastly, pesticides. So in this case, the base of the pyramid is strong, and overall, this will lead to healthy lawn and a minimum amount of pesticides. Unfortunately, people are looking for the quick fix in our society, and oftentimes the standard lawn maintenance protocol involves pesticides, specifically herbicides first, and then all of these other details on top of that. So in order to get the pyramid set up this way, that's the basis of this talk, and the publications that Erica will send you would provide you with all the details you need to do that. When you go to big box stores particularly, they're going to advertise the pesticides as the way to maintain your lawn, but unfortunately it's a bit of a treadmill. In order to keep the lawn looking the same, it requires more pesticides. And oftentimes that has people use weed and feed. So weed and feed is both fertilizer and herbicide mixed in one. If you want to kill your weeds, awesome. Do that either by popping them out or do spot spraying if you want to. And if you want to keep a nice thick stand of lawn going, awesome. Do that with fertilizer. When you're mixing these two products together, it leads to unnecessary use of pesticides, specifically the herbicides, and oftentimes, especially if one's using a spreader and they end up on a sidewalk or concrete, they make their way into waterways and are detrimental to the environment. Other problems you might see with grasses, one is dog injury. When dogs pee on lawn, it will burn it. It's a fertilizer burn. The good news is that over a period of time, it'll just go away and green up again. A couple of other problems you might see is red thread. It's really just a cosmetic problem. Happens on ryegrasses. Fescues are a little bit more resistant. Red thread, kind of like most plant diseases, it's a symptom of less than ideal grass. So add more fertilizer, grow stronger turf, you'll probably less likely to get that problem. And there aren't any chemicals available for homeowners to use for red thread. Another problem that people get is European crane fly. And when there are a lot of crane flies, these larvae on the lower left of the screen are called leather jackets. During the summer, they're working their way through the soil and they're causing some damage. If you were to excavate an area and you see a lot of them in a small area and you're seeing this kind of damage, note to self, they are there and they're causing damage. Some things that you can do about it include just growing the healthy turf, looking for brown spots and thinning in the fall. And really, when you do that, then you know to add seed so that it will regrow the following year. Also, you might see bird activity, like in September. Thinking at my office, I've seen just flocks of starlings moving in September, and they're feeding on those crane fly larvae. Drought stress can also minimize the damage a little bit. There are beneficial nematodes that you could use, so that's a product. Nematodes are naturally existing soil organisms, and they go through and they kill the larvae while they're in the soil. And then the chemicals available for crane fly are toxic to bees, so recommend that you mow and remove any clippings, and if you can, overall, just avoid that. And then earthworm activity is another minor problem. Earthworms churn the soil. That's a sign of healthy soil. That's great. But also they create spots where weeds can grow and germinate. So here's where the practice of overseeding and applying lawn seed can fill in those gaps really nicely. In terms of information sources, Erica will send you a link to this. It's called Practical Lawn Establishment and Renovation, step-by-step how to establish your lawn. Also, this one, Maintaining a Healthy Lawn in Western Oregon, just really key details on all those cultural steps that we talked about. And then if you want to dive deep, there's other resources out there, but I'm doubting for this group that you will check those out. To review what we talked about here, the lawn situation, we grow an awful lot about it. People have different expectations about lawn. Sadly, most people's expectations don't match the workload that they're willing to put into it. So my first recommendation is figure out what you want, figure out what you need to do to get your lawn looking that way, and then follow those steps on a yearly basis to keep it looking good. The standard lawn options, ryegrass, fescue, they both have their pluses and minuses. Oftentimes when you buy seed mixes, you'll get a mix. Over time, it's going to change in terms of the grasses you see, the broadleafs that move in. All that's dependent on the soil, it's dependent on the water, drainage, all those kinds of things. Growing healthy turf, mow high, mow often, water, fertilize, etc. If you want to go with eco-lawns, it's certainly recommended, and there's a lot of advantages, including more drought resistant. And then in terms of handling pests and diseases, it really just comes back to growing healthy turf. If you do that, you'll probably have minimal pest and disease problems. So with that, Erica, are there any more questions?
Most of the questions you have answered. I'll invite folks to pose new questions if they'd like to. There is one that you didn't answer, and I'm not sure if you can. It's, we have chickens that roam free often. Will nitrogen fertilizers impact them?
Ooh, they roam onto lawn area. With fertilizers, the idea is that when you apply them, you're going to water them in. So presumably, if you're following that step, it's not going to impact your chickens, but I wouldn't let chickens go on a lawn that was freshly fertilized with granular fertilizer that hasn't been watered in.
I'm looking for ones that you didn't answer. So there's one that says, when seeding a new lawn, how much seed do you apply?
A lot. I would follow the recommendations on the package and at least do that much, but if you double it, you'll get stand establishing faster.
And then when overseeding, should you do the entire lawn or just brown areas?
With overseeding, the idea is that you do both. So if you have brown areas, I would hand apply seed like pretty heavily in those areas. And then I would also set it up so that you're applying a lower rate over the whole area.
Okay, and then if you want to add yarrow, do you need to dethatch the yard?
Yeah, if you're going to want to mix in broadleaves, I would go with the renovation technique where you're renovating the soil, you're scalping it, you're exposing as much soil as you can. Just like grass seed, yarrow is going to germinate best when it's touching the soil with just a very little bit of mulch on top.
Okay, so comments, great presentation. Looking forward to establishing my lawn this fall. Thank you.
Yeah,
Not seeing any more come in. I sure do appreciate your time, Weston. This is a
my
great
pleasure.
workshop. And if folks have follow-up questions, our answer clinic is happy to do some research and help to provide further resources. And I want to just remind you to watch your email. I'll be sending out those links to publications and a survey. And we do have another upcoming workshop on growing your own herbs on August 3rd, and I'll send you information about that. So thanks.
Great. Well, happy gardening, folks.
All right.
Thanks for joining. Take care.
Take care, Weston.
All right. Bye-bye.